Hey everybody, today I wanted to talk through 5 fictional books that had a really big impact on my life. Of course, there are many more, but these 5 jumped out at me today as something that I could talk about that would be kind of interesting for me and fun, and maybe it's fun for you too. So the first book, and many of these I've read dozens of times, and they stretch back into kind of the first early times as a young adult reader, that they really influenced my view of fiction and writing and reading and inspired me along the way. So one of the first ones that I want to share is Altered States by Paddy Chayefsky. This is the story of a scientist who gets a little bit carried away with his grandeur, let's say, and in a way kind of like a modern day kind of Frankenstein story. It's got all kinds of cool things in it about, psychedelic drugs, religious iconography, and time travel and genetics, and a myriad of things that are just really fascinating. It's a bit dated. This was also a movie that I saw. They made a movie out of it in the 80s, late 70s, early 80s. It was a really great movie. And of course, I wanted to see that right away. And I've seen the film a few times since. But kind of science fiction, kind of blended into actual science, which I always kind of enjoy that sort of thing. The next book that I want to talk about is very similar in a way. You can see that I've read it so many times that the cover has fallen off. But it's Michael Crichton's The Andromeda Strain, which is about a government program designed to collect bacteria and viruses that may be in low Earth orbit or at the fringes of the atmosphere, and what can go horribly wrong with that. And it's one of these books too, kind of like Altered States, where Crichton, if you've ever read anything by Crichton, I would really recommend it. By the way, kind of the author of several incredibly prominent things over the years that have been adapted into films, as this one was. This book was written in the late 60s, early 70s. It's this blending of science fact and science fiction into this kind of taut, tense kind of detective story in a way. Highly recommend. I've read this several times. Fascinating piece of work. The next are quite different. This book is one of the first books that I ever remember reading, and it's called The Wump World. And really, it's a story of these creatures that live on a peaceful planet, and they just eat grass and drink water and have a good time. And it has these just really incredible illustrations, and you can kind of like imagine, the world of these creatures, how happy and idyllic the whole setting is. And then all these people show up in spaceships and basically kind of destroy the entire planet, forcing the Wumps to live in underground caves and eat mushrooms. They are very unhappy, of course, until all the people exhaust all of the resources of the planet and like build giant cities everywhere and pollute everything. They all leave, they all go off to find some other planet to destroy, and leave the Wumps alone. So the Wumps bust out and kind of find some fragments of where their world was, and eventually, kind of reclaim it. And this is really kind of one of the first books that I read that made me aware of ecology, science-oriented topics, and thinking about the exploitation of the environment and all that kind of stuff. And I just loved it. And it's so kind of emotive. I mean, if you can see these little creatures on the front, highly recommend. The next one is, again, kind of similar in a theme, is Frank Herbert's Dune. Recently, last couple of years, made into a movie Second one's coming out. Well, we're in a strike right now, so maybe not right now, but sounds like it's almost ready. Dune is amalgam of historical facts projected in the future. It's science fiction for sure, but it's got politics, it's dystopian, it's got all of the things about humanity that are distasteful: conquest, fascism, exploitation of people for economic gain, rebel movements, religious fanaticism, all these kinds of things woven into this gigantic universe that Herbert creates. I couldn't recommend it more. And the other part of it is, like, again, that kind of like, there's things that you read and you're like, that makes sense, and this is in a future time, so there's mentions of echoes of things that you may have heard of. There's a lot of stuff that we can, as a kind of a future theorist, Herbert was, to kind of think about, oh wow, artificial intelligence and terrorist movements and genetic manipulation of people to create super beings, and it echoes with things that we think about on a day-to-day basis. And I really recommend it. I thought the current run of films, with the first one being, of course, the only one I've seen, are really good adaptations of this, but the book itself goes into so much more depth. And it's amazing how much depth is in it for how short a book it is. Another one that is called Dark Tower. It's a Dark Tower series by Stephen King. I've read a lot of Stephen King's books over the years, and I love them. However, to me, the Dark Tower series is really his penultimate achievement, and something that I come back to and think about a lot. A little bit difficult to dive into everything that happens in the series, but this is the first book in the series and starts that journey for the main character in the book, the gunslinger, and you get a sense of the history that he's had and what his role is, in part, in this world, which is kind of a post-apocalyptic setting. Such a book that is so evocative and almost written in a sort of Hemingway-esque way. It's sparse and small bits and phrases and things, and paint this huge picture that your mind fills it in, that you don't necessarily need to have him describe everything in tremendous detail. Someone like Tolkien would do. And finally, that's the last book that I would really bring up, which I thought I grabbed, but I didn't, is Lord of the Rings. Hugely influential. I have read the Lord of the Rings series every year for literally, I don't even know, 10, 12 years, perhaps more than that. I've probably read the full series of the Lord of the Rings 20 times in my life. Not the biggest Hobbit fan. I read it once, long time ago. I read it again a couple of years ago because I just felt like I should. Sets the stage for Lord of the Rings, but not the biggest fan. Silmarillion, not, again, I got it. I read it many years ago. I read it again more recently. It gives you some sense of the history and such. It's lacking the emotional connection to the world, to me, that the Lord of the Rings series does. And so that's my core Tolkien piece, is just those three books. Fellowship of the Ring, Two Towers, and Return of the King. I've read every word. I love the foreword in it. The foreword in the old books is this just evocative one-page statement about what the books mean to this particular person, and I couldn't agree more. One of the things that I'm loosely paraphrasing this person who wrote the foreword was that if a door opened up to Middle Earth, he'd run through it like a shot. Absolutely, 100% would do that. hopefully when that door opened up, a few of my friends would be there because they would probably do the same thing. So many other books you could talk about, and I would love to hear some of your favorites. Of course, I have many more. Yeah, if you enjoy this sort of thing, I do different sorts of videos depending on what I'm thinking about at a particular time. But I may do some more on sort of nonfiction pieces or other fiction works too. Hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you have a great day. Appreciate you stopping by and taking some time with me.